Okay, I have some updates. November 6th was a really big day for OpenAI, the company. They made a bunch of announcements. They changed some important things about how their users interact with their products. They announced new functionality that actually streamlines a bunch of the stuff that we've built for our clients over the last year. And then they kind of set their whole company on fire. And fired their CEO, and then brought their CEO back and fired the board. And oh my gosh, but that's not the point of this talk. I'm going to cover just a few highlights of the technology side, none of the political drama. We're going to talk a little bit about Moore's Law, developer quality of life, assistants and threads, and then GPTs. So Moore's Law, first of all, just everything got faster and cheaper. They got the turbo version of GPT. They dropped the price in half for output tokens, and it's like it's like a quarter the price for input tokens. So cheaper than ever to throw a bunch of context at it. Also, the other really fun Moore's Law thing is the bigger context window. We've been rolling with 4K and 8K token windows. That has jumped up to 16K and 128K. For context into what this larger context window means, you can now put an entire, like a 300-page novel into ChatGPT and then ask it to do stuff with that information. That's how big 128K is. So it can't it can't put that much information back out. So it can't write a 300-page book yet, but it can write a book report on a 300-page book.
Summer reading list got easier.
The kids do have it easier these days. There's also a ton of development quality of life. They have JSON mode, and what this is a virtual JSON appears and helps solve whatever problem you are having. Wait, that's not right. That's not real at all. Remember that whole tips presentation we gave where we're like, oh my gosh, look, you can like have it produce it in JSON, and then if it's not right, you can like have it fix the JSON. Okay, well, now you just say, give me back a JSON object, and it just does that. So that's really, really nice. They also clearly heard that like testing stuff is really difficult. So they now have this new thing called seed, and you literally just say like, you produce a number and you say, if I send you this prompt with this number, I always want to get the same thing back, right? So it's kind of like item potency for the API, but not exactly. There's more about this too, like if they upgrade the model, it'll change stuff, and I won't go into all the details, but like we should be able to have like unit tests for this stuff now, where before it was like, you never could. For assistants, so chatbots, right? What are the chatbots we're making? They are now calling those assistants, and we used to have to just kind of like stuff all the instructions, like act like a pirate and follow these rules and use all this like information about the page that our user is on. And we used to have to send that like every single time. Now you like create an assistant and you give it its instructions, and then you upload files, and you can upload like 20 files, and they can be as big as you want. And then it like decides when to go to those and look up the knowledge that it needs to answer the question. Also in assistants, you can add functions, which are just API calls. So you can say, hey, assistant, like if you don't know the answer to this, call our API and we'll give you an answer to it. So they've kind of like merged their old APIs thing into assistants. So it's all like one thing you call, and it just does it itself. What this looks like is that you basically create an assistant. You also create a thread, so you don't have to like manage, you don't have to resend every message in the history of the conversation anymore. You just send the latest message and reference the thread ID. It optimizes, it has an infinite memory for threads. So it optimizes the looking up into the past of the conversation for whatever it needs to know. And the additional cost for this is 3 cents per thread, which is so cheap. but also not so cheap that you do have to make sure not to like create a new thread every single time. And then for all those files I said you can upload, no matter how big, well, you have to pay for them to store those. And that's 6 gigs, $6 per gig per month. The last thing that they introduced, which I'm just going to talk a little bit about, is GPTs. I don't think GPTs are necessarily like super relevant to the stuff we build for our clients, but people are going to be talking about it a lot. So there's some important things to know. This is a terrible name for a product. They literally are calling them GPTs. It's so bad. All these is just the assistant thing I just talked about, except hosted by them. And then there's going to be a store. We know nothing about the store. We know nothing about how people will make money from the store. We just know there will be one. This is kind of the only interesting one, is that enterprise customers can have their own internal ones. So like you might see once we get into the enterprise program and we have our own like enterprise account, that maybe our Trainual GPT is available there and it's just for us, right? And then finally, it's just a terrible, terrible name for a product to call it GPT. Those are all my updates. What questions do we have about OpenAI that does not include the dumpster fire of their leadership drama? Yes?
If you make your own GPT, which is a terrible name, as you agreed, for internal use, can you access it via an API?
Yeah, GPTs are supposed to be accessible via API, but I don't really know how that's going to work either. For me, I'm like, why wouldn't you just use the assistants? So we'll see what happens there.